The iron still hangs, half sunk in Mississippi soil, curled like a serpent that once bit and forgot to let go. It's rusted now, crumbling but not innocent. Ava sits near it, barefoot where the grass won't grow. She doesn't speak. Her stillness is louder than thunder. Not broken, only paused. Her presence carries the weight of something unsaid for too long. Wind stirs the leaves. It doesn't whisper, it remembers. Ava, it says. Not like a name, but a reckoning. The year is 1866, Natchez, Mississippi. On paper, the war has ended. Slavery is abolished, but the cotton still grows, and the overseers still shout. Only now they call it labor. Contracts instead of chains. But what is a paper promise against a loaded gaze? Ava lives on the same land where her mother died in childbirth. The same porch where her father was made to kneel for looking too long at a white man's face. The same well where her sister's doll was drowned, to teach her grief early. Ava knows this land not with love, but with memory, a kind of muscle no one can cut away. She is paid now. A few cents a week, but she owes them more. For food, for firewood, for a shack that leaks. She is free, but freedom here comes with a price tag and a loaded silence. Her skin no longer wears the whip, but her name still comes second to a ledger. At night, she boils beans in silence. But silence has sound, especially for those who've survived it. The sound of beans boiling is a clock ticking backward. The sound of rope creaking in the wind. The sound of breath held too long. A crow cries outside. She flinches. The memory floods back like fever without sweat. It had rained. Tin roof. The drops were angry. The sky wouldn't stop staring. She had been chained to the tree. Those dozen days. For shielding a girl no older than 13 from a man who prayed with one hand and struck with the other. By day 3, her wrists bled. By day 6, her mind wandered. She saw her mother again, humming a tune Ava hadn't remembered in years. That same hymn still hums in her bones now, soft but constant. Like her breath. Like her scar, on day 8 ants crawled over her ankles and she welcomed them. At least they acknowledged her body still lived. On day 10, she tried to chew bark. On day 11, her eyes didn't blink. On the final day, they unchained her, not because they pitied her, but because they feared the dying might curse the living. They laughed about it. They called it discipline. They said she looked better thinner. The landowners changed, but their shadows stayed the same. There are 7 now. 7 men in white shirts and red-stained knuckles. One writes poetry about the river before commanding whips. He believes art redeems his cruelty. His pen scratches verses about sunsets while his boots remain caked in dried blood. One kisses his cross before branding skin. He speaks of God's order, as if divinity was carved with fire. One wears Ava's necklace like a trophy, stolen while she lay unconscious. It rests against his chest, where his heart should be. One hums hymns when he works, the same ones that haunted her hunger. His voice is sweet, but each note is laced with mockery. One makes the others laugh by mimicking screams. He is the loudest, the most animated, and perhaps the most afraid. One dips his fingers in tobacco and licks them after beatings. His mouth is always wet. Always smirking, one says, God gave us dominion, as if dominion means desecration. He stands stillest. He watches most. They call Ava ma'am when it suits them, girl when it doesn't. They speak of breaking spirits, as though freedom is a wild horse they must tame. They laugh when she walks past, not because she is weak, but because they know she remembers, and remembering is dangerous. But Ava no longer listens to their voices. She listens to flame. At night, in the kitchen, the fire crackles like an old woman's whisper. She watches lard melt in a cast-iron pan. One drop hisses when it hits the surface. It sounds like memory screaming. A jar of nails rests on the windowsill. ordinary, forgotten, but Ava sees them, and they shimmer back at her. Not as tools, as prophecy. She reaches out, touches one. Rust pricks her finger. She doesn't flinch. The blood is warm, familiar. It makes a small dot on the windowsill wood. She stares at it, a single star in a night of forgetting. Outside, someone laughs. A drunken overseer's voice. She lets the blood drip again. It makes a pattern. Earlier that day, a girl tripped in the dirt field. One of the men yanked her up by the hair and whispered something no one heard. But Ava saw the way the girl went quiet afterward. And Ava remembered being her. The nails clink together softly when the wind hits the sill. She looks at them not as metal, but as sentences. Each one a word, each one a name. In her sleep, Ava dreams not of escape. She dreams of her hands. What they used to do, cook, sew, braid, what they could do again. She dreams of a table, a bowl of cornbread. The salt stings her tongue, the hymn hums in her again. Those dozen days, those dozen nights. 7 names, 1 woman, no forgiveness, there is no thunder, only the quiet pressure before it. The earth has stilled around her. Even the crow on the sill doesn't caw tonight. It watches. She turns her head. Meets its eye. Neither of them blink. Time counted. Names remembered. 1 flame waiting. Before we continue, drop a comment telling your location and time, so Ava knows where her story echoes, so memory knows it hasn't been forgotten. Some chains rust, others remember, and some are waiting to return in another form. She began to move differently. Not with fear, not with fury, but with a rhythm only the blood remembers. Ava's hands, once made to scrub, now moved with precision. Her silence was no longer surrender. It was strategy. Each morning she stirred the grits as if circling fate. Each sweep of her broom traced a boundary between the world they saw and the one she was conjuring. The others didn't notice at first. They saw a woman with downcast eyes, skin dry from fire heat, palms blistered by the handle of a rusted pot. But Ava's body was a psalm in mourning, and every motion was a verse they could not read. In the cellar beneath the kitchen she found what remained of her mother's secrets. The air was cool there, musky with memory. Clay and root, vinegar and metal. Cobwebs trembled like harp strings as she passed. She lit a candle with a match that hissed like the lard did last week. Snake ash. Hog fat. Metal filings. Her mother's jars, barely labeled, still waited. She opened them slowly. The smell hit like childhood, not of sweetness, but of knowing. She took 3 kitchen nails from a drawer too shallow for hiding. By moonlight she sharpened them on a whetstone, humming the same hymn from the tree days. The sound left her mouth like breath from bone. Each note trembled, not from weakness, but prophecy. She wrapped the nails in cloth torn from the dress she bled in. It was once sky blue. Now the stains looked like galaxies. This was no longer a memory. It was steel wrapped in mourning. Outside her cabin, where grass refused to grow, Ava drew 7 circles in ash. Each circle cradled a name, one of her tormentors. Beside each she scattered a handful of dirt, each scented with a punishment. Turpentine for the man who burned her name into a ledger. Salt for the man who starved her for protecting a child. Molasses for the one who smirked while he cut her braid. She didn't cry. Each night, she burned a strand of her own hair over the ash circles, not for grief, but control. The smell of singed self made her feel sovereign again. One night the flame danced higher. It made the ash shift. In the flicker, she saw her father's hands, calloused and trembling, teaching her how to hold a blade of corn so it wouldn't snap. Even the tender things fight back, he once said. She looked at the ash. A name glowed faintly red. It was working. The next morning she touched the heavy pan, and it hissed again. She remembered the welt it left when she had dropped it once, and how they said it taught her balance. Balance. She traced its edge now like a prayer. In the barn, a rope loop swung gently, nothing tied to it now, but Ava's stomach remembered. Her neck didn't need to feel it again. She walked past it like a ghost passing a past life. In the sugar barrel, she saw her reflection in the molasses crust. They once held her under. Just for fun, she had coughed sweetness for a week. Now, that same sugar clung to the spoon she dipped, thick and slow like judgment. The mirror in her cabin cracked last spring. She never fixed it. Now it split her face like time. The left side showed what they thought they saw. The right, what they feared would return. She touched her own cheek and whispered, "Soon." Outside, the crows were no longer curious. They were waiting. They sat on branches in perfect lines, black eyes blinking slowly, as if they, too, kept count. The other black women in the field stopped asking questions. One elder left cornmeal at Ava's doorstep. Another traced a cross of ash near her window. They knew. The young ones only stared, afraid, but also drawn. One boy, no more than 9, saw her sharpen a blade under moonlight and said nothing, just nodded, then walked away like someone who had seen the story before. The white men didn't see a thing. They mocked each other, played cards, drank, bragged. One slapped her backside and laughed. "Still tight," he said. She smiled. The smile meant nothing, but her hand had already drawn the final circle. She made her marks on the wall behind her cot. Each line stood for one man. Each night, she traced one with red chalk stolen from the ledgers. When it rained, she tasted tin again. When the wind howled, she heard her mother's voice. When she cooked beans, she counted the boils, 7 nights, 7 tools, 7 names. The rusted nails, now wrapped in muslin, lay beneath her bed. Beside them, a curved knife never used for meat. A bottle of hog fat thickened with ash. Her old chain, coiled like a waiting question. She watched herself in the cracked mirror again. Her face no longer flinched. The hymn came from her throat again, but softer now. Like lullaby, like warning. The night before the first mark was to be answered, she stood barefoot in the doorway. The sky above the smokehouse burned faint red. Someone was cooking meat. She clutched the first nail in her palm. The metal was warm, not from fire, but from memory. She stepped forward. The dirt didn't whisper this time. It waited, just like her. The poetic overseer sipped his chicory coffee under the rusted porch beam. Unaware, the bottom of the cup cradled Ava's offering: snake ash, hog oil, and the crushed root of the bitter vine. He paused between sips. A line of verse formed on his lips, the kind he liked to recite before punishments. But this time, the rhyme collapsed halfway. Choking in his throat, he dropped the cup. The ceramic cracked open on the dirt floor like a skull. His hands trembled. Not with fear, with memory. He saw her again. Ava, eyes swollen shut, lips bloodied, singing that hymn through a throat not meant to survive. His knees buckled before his voice did. The last words he ever spoke didn't curse or cry. They rhymed. With her name, the others heard his fall, laughed about old age and whiskey. But Ava was already watching, from the shadows of the smokehouse, where rust clung to metal like dried blood. The second one stepped inside to light the lard lamp. But the wick hissed, then erupted. The flame rose not in fire but in black smoke, thick with her ash. It twisted midair into a circle, her circle. He screamed, not from pain, but recognition. It was the same shape she had drawn behind her cabin. The fire left no blister, just a dark symbol on his shoulder, branded by silence. Ava didn't blink. She walked back to the kitchen and stirred the pot. As the overseers began to fall, one by one, her name rose, whispers and cane. Fields. Ava, among the children, among the women who remembered, among the men who watched and said nothing until now. One overseer ran. He made it past the well, past the boundary of the field, all the way to the tree, but he tripped. Something caught his ankle. Something rusted and coiled. The chain, the same one that held her for those dozen days, now wrapped around him like a patient. God, he was found at dawn, stiff, eyes wide open, lips pressed together like prayer, no blood, just presence. By the fifth night, the remaining two stopped sleeping. They blamed one another. Paranoia fermented. One disappeared into the night. The other walked to the sheriff. The sheriff came. With boots too clean and laws too crooked, a trial was staged, not for justice, but for appearances. They blamed spirits. They blamed spells. They blamed vengeance in the blood of slaves. But Ava was gone, vanished, like a breath between storms. The last overseer, the one who wore her necklace, was seen stumbling toward the swamp barefoot, mumbling her name. He was never seen again, but the necklace turned up on the altar of a small church days later, wrapped around 7 nails, bent, buried in a crescent. A child found them, didn't cry, didn't call for help. He just sat beside them, as if waiting for her to finish something. The preacher didn't touch the nails. He simply knelt beside them and whispered. She finished it. Behind him others gathered, the old, the young, the lost, the quiet. One by one, they formed a circle, not planned, but summoned, around the crescent grave of metal and hair. No one cried. No one spoke. They just listened, to wind, to silence, to something deeper than sound. Ava had not only broken her tormentors, she had broken something older, older than slavery, older than chains. Fear, the kind of fear that lived in the back of every throat, that made eyes drop, that turned screams into swallowed sobs. Now, for the first time, that fear belonged to someone else. In town, white men muttered about curses, about swamps and spirits. They locked their doors earlier. They slept with guns by their beds. But no bullet could undo a story once it had teeth. In the fields, work changed, not the labor, not the pay, but the air. Now, when a child spilled water, no one flinched expecting a blow. When someone sang while picking okra, no one hushed them. Ava had cracked something open, and stories bloomed where silence once grew. They said her braid had roots, that it grew a vine beneath the church, that the metal in the tree hummed louder every 7th night, that babies born under the crescent moon held her fire in their palms. A traveling teacher years later would arrive in Natchez and ask about the missing men. He'd get no answers, just glances. But in one house, an old woman gave him a cup of tea and said, "You're asking the wrong questions, sir. Don't ask where they went. Ask why they didn't see her coming." The teacher laughed nervously, but her eyes didn't blink. She placed a bent nail on the table and pushed it forward. He never asked again. Some decades later, a story began to appear in hushed sermons and back-page pamphlets. A woman, never named directly, who turned tools of survival into weapons of reckoning. No birth date, no grave, just signs, a circle of ash, a rusted nail, a song with no written notes, and always, always, her name said like prayer, Ava. There are records now, buried in county archives, death logs missing signatures, a ledger with ink blotted where her name used to be. A courtroom sketch with empty chairs, and a single entry written in the margin by an unknown hand. She was not vengeance. She was memory correcting itself. Years later, children played under that same tree, not knowing the chain once held fire, but they hummed her hymn anyway, handed down like a lullaby, rewritten with each new voice. One day, lightning struck the tree, split it in two, but the chain remained, unmoved, wrapped like a crown around what was left. A tourist came to see it once, took a picture, posted it online. Caption said, "No idea what this tree is, but it feels alive." That post went viral. No one knew why, but someone, maybe you, whispered her name. When they saw it, Ava, not just a woman, a force, not just a victim, a story that kept writing itself long after the ink dried. A daughter of chains who forged her name into steel, a witness who never closed her eyes, fire that never stopped burning, and when the wind rustles the sugar cane, or a nail drops from a rafter, or a flame bends without touch, maybe, just maybe, she's there, watching, waiting, not for revenge, but for us to remember. Subscribe, hit the bell, and share this story to keep history alive. Let Ava's voice never fall silent again.